So I've got Mark here, Mark Aaiva, who's just going to be telling us what he as a family did in terms of identifying and nurturing his daughter's gifts. So hello, Mark. If you kindly introduce yourself and your family and your daughter in terms of what you've done in sport.
Thank you. Good morning, Mabel. My name's Mark Aaiva. I'm the head strength and conditioning coach here at the IAP gym in Hallam. Destiny, what can I say? When she was born, she had already, I guess, progressed, through those baby years, as a 90 percentile type persons. Whenever we took her to her visits as a young child, she was already exceeding, reflexes that were beyond the 90 percentile. Her awareness to things around her was around the 90 percentile. But unbeknown to us, if she were ever going to progress into where she was today, who would have known? With myself and Rosie and her mum at the time, we were both, proficient in sport, and grew up around sport our entire lives, and it's still a big part of my life today. Having worked with a lot of athletes in many fields of sport, given my degree in biophysics, and competing for my country in 4 different sports. It was inevitable that destiny was going to be something to do with sport. It just happened to be tennis. When one day we introduced her to sport, from her crawling on the mats and gyms that I'd worked with, training professional fighters, she took to wanting to be involved in whatever activity we were part of at the time, and from boxing gyms to soccer pitches to rugby pitches, she was always around sport. How she got involved with tennis, that's another story in itself, which I'll share with you and make it nice and short. She didn't like to share. Basically was what it was. She didn't like sharing the ball when she was part of a little junior girls soccer team. Whenever she was with my rugby boys, she wanted to stand out, even amongst the men, to show Dad and her mum that that she could match it with them in the agility tests. Even with my fighters I was working with at the time, she wanted to show them up when it came to strength tests. She was just so competitive, and one day we decided, well, look, you can't play in a team if you don't share or become part of the team to be able to assist in the overall spectrum of what a team environment means. But not to say that there was any detriment to her in the long run, but we thought an individual sport would suit her better. So we sat her down one night and said, look, here's a list, and from that list you choose whatever one it is, and we'll look to facilitate it the best way we can to help you achieve the best in that sport. She went to bed that night and woke up the next morning and didn't just choose a sport. She woke up the next morning and said that she wanted to be #1 in the world at that chosen sport, which is now tennis. It blew my mind, because I'd never been involved with tennis, coming from a rugby background, and in a country was rugby mad. Tennis was only ever played by a group of kids that could afford it. Were privileged to be able to play the sport. And living here in Australia at the time, where she was born in Melbourne, when she chose tennis, I turned to her mum Rosie and said, well, look, I know how to get her fit and strong enough to play the sport, and the rest is up to you to be able to facilitate a pathway to helping her learn the skill sets to be able to play the game of tennis. So the work that went into those earlier years was more about fun and having her enjoy being part of in the sport, that for some don't often get that privilege to play in a sport, burdened by the expenses of the equipment itself, or being able to understand the dynamics of the sport, and more importantly, finding the enjoyment when I guess you're out there on your own now, but with the team, it's still in the bigger picture of being behind the scenes to getting her prepared for the sport. She's out there all alone now, or he, for that matter, for boys. So that's how she got into tennis. The drive, or having, you know, her parents being, you know, at certain levels of sport, we knew, you know, how to go about, you know, preparing her, you know, nurturing her to, you know, being physically prepared, mentally prepared, and psychologically prepared. It was just about attaining the skill sets of being able to play tennis at a competitive level. In those earlier years, she excelled so quickly because of her athleticism. I guess the gene between myself and her mum helped that to great degree. But her smarts, you know, in combination of the two of us, you know, was something a little bit more, I guess, of a, you know, an X factor, because she loved school and she hated missing school, and, you know, she just loved being around others at school, and enjoying, you know, being a kid. It was hard to be able to manage that, you know, with this training, the sport, and allowing her to grow up as a kid and enjoy life as a youngster, given that she was excelling so quickly in the sport that it sometimes prevented her from being able to, you know, be a kid, because she was away, you know, with national sides, you know, her provincial sides of Victoria, and heavily immersed in training. You know, again, you know, didn't give her the luxury that other kids had, you know, with being able to attend birthdays, family gatherings, because she was always, you know, immersed in, you know, in great, you know, stints of training. But when she did get the chance to be around other kids, you know, she lived it up, and she enjoyed, you know, when she had that time.
Okay, all right, thank you very much. So, in terms of the challenges as family, I mean, I guess you had the advantage that you were from the athletic background, both you and Rose. But in terms of information, or you say you didn't know much about tennis. So what did you do to get more information or to keep her informed? Because obviously you didn't have a background in tennis. What did you guys have to do?
The good thing about today is, you know, with the ability to be able to have world-class knowledge at your hand, at your fingertips. Even though social media then was still, you know, in its development stage. There was internet, of course, books from the library, and, you know, knowing, you know, the sport, you know, and more I guess the ones that were leading the way in the sport. You had your usuals in the Williams sisters story, Federer's story, Pete Sampras, Agassi, you know, Steffi Graf, you know, Australian icons, and you know, in Leighton Hewitt, Jason Stoltenberg, another name, you know, obviously John Newcomb, and, you know, and the rest goes on. Mark Philippoussis, you know, those big names. You know, we followed tennis throughout, you know, my sporting careers, and those are the names that, you know, that stuck out the most. There's a lot that I probably haven't mentioned, but one thing came to mind was, you know, just I guess, you know, the rawness, and how they got about, you know, getting to, you know, to I guess the legendary status, you know, that they hold today, and won, you know, some of the feats that, you know, haven't been repeated for many years, and some probably won't be repeated for many years, you know, to come. How we